You are listening to the 90 Days Later podcast with Anna Charles, episode 113. Welcome to the 90 Days Later podcast, where I show you how life with less alcohol is more fun than you think. I work with high achievers who struggle to drink a glass of wine without it turning into 2 bottles. I'm the one they call when they want to take it or leave it. So if you want to change your relationship with alcohol that doesn't involve counting days sober, you're in the right place. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Today we are going to be talking about compromises. Ooh, tasty topic, I hear you say. But before we do that, I just want to tell you about something new I have in my offering suite. If you're one of the people who you're really interested, you want to do this, you want to change your relationship with alcohol for good, but you're not sure about coaching, you've not had it before, you're not entirely sure how it works. I'm now offering 90-minute intensive sessions. Now, you can run this as a one-off if, for instance, you are just a bit perplexed about one area of your drinking and you want my eyes and advice and solutions on that. Or maybe you want it because you just want to try it out. You've never been coached before. What is it like? What is the experience like? So I'm now offering, say, these 90-minute intensives. You can book one directly at 90dayslater.co/intensive. And if you do go ahead and book one of those and you want to take this further, right? You really want to just dive in, get coached, get this thing figured out with alcohol. I will even credit the cost of the intensive that you bought from me towards the coaching package. So you don't end up paying extra for the intensive. All right, so if you want that, 90dayslater.co/intensive. Okay, back to today's show, talking about compromises. One of the things I hear a lot is someone might say to me, I want to drink less, but I don't want to compromise on my life. I don't want to compromise on the experience, right? As in, I still want to have fun, right? Maybe you see drinking as your downtime. And people say, if I compromise on that, then I'm compromising on myself, and I'm just not willing to do that. I'm an adult. If I want to have a drink, I'm going to have a drink, even when we don't really want to have the drink, right? That's the conundrum that we face. But then the other thing I hear is, well, why do I need to compromise at all, right? Why can't I just live my life and with the alcohol? And why do you talk about compromising? It's not fair. It's not fair that I have to compromise. My friend doesn't. She can take it or leave it. It's not fair I have to, right? Wah, poor me. But what I want to offer is that you are already compromising. You are already doing this right this second, every day. If you're not happy with the results that you are getting, and if you're listening to this podcast, which is about how to drink less, there's a high degree of likelihood that you know that compromising that you're doing is connected to how much you're drinking. So the question I want to pose today is, what else are you compromising on by drinking? I'm going to pause. This is an intentional pause for you to answer that question for yourself. And I'm going to give you the answer that I saw and the answer I see again and again and again. You're compromising on your life. On your life. Yes, I said it. Here's how it goes. Rather than you being willing to compromise on how you feel in the moment in order to get what you ultimately want, you are willing to compromise on what you ultimately want for how you feel in the moment. Right? That's it. You're more willing to compromise on what future might have than the fact that you get to have that wine at 7 in the evening. That's really it. You could use the word trade, actually, instead of compromise, if that lands better. You're willing to trade what you really want, which is whatever you want in your life, for what you want in the moment when the desire to drink comes to you. This is related to something I see again and again in modern life, actually just not restricted to alcohol. There's some sort of sense of underlying entitlement that we deserve to have good experiences, we deserve to be happy. We shouldn't have to compromise. I shouldn't have to go for this or that. I should be able to get everything that I want. We don't want to be uncomfortable. I want to feel good. I want to feel good all the time. But here's what I have learned. The path to not compromising, right? That's taking the perspective of, I deserve to feel relaxed after a hard day. I deserve the reward. I'm doing so well. I deserve this, right? That path was creating for me a lot of discomfort in my life as a whole. What I realized was that the thing that was keeping me stuck was not being willing to compromise on the small stuff. I was thinking, yeah, go me, look at me, I'm choosing, what I want. I'm doing what I want at the moment. I'm having the drink, even if I don't want it, I'm an adult, I can have it. But every time I did that, every time I kind of rebelled, I was compromising on my big picture life. Every single time. Now, when I talk on the podcast and when I'm talking with clients, the messages and the learnings often land easier if we talk with an example outside of direct drinking. And my loyal listeners will often hear me talking about driving, whether it's parking. Gosh, I must have mentioned parking goodness knows how many times on the podcast, or driving down an unfamiliar road rather than motorway. Well, I'm going to talk about driving again today, and it's just as well my husband does not listen to this, at least knowingly listen, because yes, he always teases me about all my driving stories. And the reason I talk often about driving, actually it's relevant to this idea of life, big picture compromise, is that it brought forward a big change in my life and in how I saw myself as being capable. And yes, I know it's only driving, but each to their own, right? It was not as big a change as changing my relationship with alcohol, but actually how I interacted with driving, the skill of driving and all of that sort of thing was fairly big for me. Backstory is I learned to drive at 17. I got my license, passed first time, but I never really enjoyed the experience. And so even after I passed, I kind of just didn't do it. There was so much discomfort I had driving. I had been a passenger in an accident when I was 16. So I think I attribute some of it to that. I was extremely nervous. I mean, before going out, even as a passenger going out in a car, I would be very, very nervous, very nervous. And I talk a lot when I talk about alcohol as to how not to shy away from it, right? I say don't avoid situations, don't resist situations, don't avoid the bars and the people. And why is that? Because there's a lot of discomfort that we feel in going out and facing other people, or knowing that there will be shabbily, or knowing that the other people are going to ask, are you drinking? Why aren't you drinking? And when you've decided not to. But I learned this in driving, that the more we shy away from the discomfort, the more we shy away from doing something, the more we teach ourselves we can't do that thing, and the bigger it grows in our mind as this is one huge challenge. You don't want to feel that way, right? As I said, I did that with driving. I avoided the discomfort more and more and more and more. In fact, I applied that strategy so well for years. And where did it get me? Well, literally nowhere, right? Literally to the point that it would take an awful lot to get me behind the wheel. I remember having sleepless nights before I was going to go out to drive. And of course, the reality was, because I didn't practice it very much when I did go out, it probably wasn't that great. All over the years, for years and years and years, nothing was really enough to compel me to drive. I mean, people would say, oh, it's fantastic, you've got your license, you've got your freedom. But I could always find someone else to drive. Frankly, at the time, boyfriends, they always kind of liked the driving. So it was easy to say, okay, you drive. I could always take the bus or the train, or I could even walk. I could take a taxi, right? Now, my life wasn't where it could be. At the time, I was living in the country, in the English countryside, where really the transportation offerings are really quite limited. But even despite that, right, I was still quite happy to go along with all the workarounds, because any kind of waiting at a bus stop in the rain, organising a lift. I mean, all the way through college, I did this, organising a lift. I'd have to, walk a bit and all the rest of it to do a car share thing. All of that was preferable to me than getting behind the wheel, right? That shows how big a resistance I had, how much discomfort I had at the idea of driving, which I didn't enjoy, right? It was just simply that I didn't enjoy it. Until the thing that spurred me on was actually getting my dream job. Up until that point, of course, now is my dream job, but until that point, and this was a good 10 years after I passed my test, 10 years, I landed my dream job and it involved driving. I had to drive to get to work. Simple as that. Bus wouldn't work. I mean, it just wouldn't work. I was in another country and I had to drive. So what ended up happening was that the pain of missing out on my dream job was bigger than the pain of driving the 20 minutes or so twice a day. And remember, I was really very scared. I was very nervous. I had resisted this and hidden for this for years. This had become this monster of a thing that I didn't want to do. And that's it in a nutshell. The pain of missing out on something that I really wanted was bigger than the pain of doing something that I really didn't want to do. Similarly, I used this same learning many years later, a good 20 years later, when changing my relationship with alcohol. The pain of me drinking too much and falling asleep on the sofa became bigger than the pain of dealing with the cravings. And for you, this might apply as the pain of not knowing what to do. How do I change my drinking? Right? I'm confused. I'm feeling alone and stuck because no one in your real life understands. And no matter what you do, you always find yourself drinking as before. Right? All of that is bigger than the pain of paying me to help you. You're more willing, when you get to the point when you're more willing to pay me than to put up with that pain, that's when we make change. Right? It's about levels of pain. So I want to ask you, where are you now? I mean, do a little review for yourself. Where are you now on your life and on your drinking? Are you less or more willing to compromise on feeling discomfort, perhaps every day, for a while, until the cravings, you get used to handling the cravings, versus the discomfort of missing out on a bigger life? Answer honestly. Sit with where you want to be. I mean, write it out if that helps. Write out the life that you want or that you could want. Maybe you don't think it's possible. Dream a little. What's your ideal life? The job, the home, the family, location where you are, the impact you make on your life and on the world. Then ask what's getting in the way. You're listening to this, you might well say, well, it's the drink. I have many people who tell me this is like the last, like Custer's last stand. This is the last thing I need to fix. Maybe because you think you're putting in less than a stellar performance at work. Maybe because it takes up all your time, right? Or the sleeping or the thinking about the drinking. Maybe it makes you lethargic. Then I want you to consider the pain of not getting that life, your future life, versus the pain of saying no to the nightly drink. That's it. That's the equation we're talking about. I want you to consider that, and I want you to decide. Which side do you come down on? There is no right answer. Because then when you've decided, then we get into actually taking action and changing the experience of it, right? And something that seems so bad, when you start moving towards it, because it's not about the drinking anymore. It's about having the time to create that life where you're off doing the thing that you want to do, whatever that is, right? Setting up a new company or a new career or whatever. Once you start moving towards that, the problem gets easier to deal with. So back to driving, for instance. When I decided I was going to have my dream job, I then was fully facing the discomfort of getting in that. And I mean, you might think this is silly, but you're getting in that car every morning. I mean, that was a big deal. Before any new job, people often worry about the job or a little anxious. Am I going to, get on with the people? Am I going to find the work easy, interesting? I thought none of that. It was obliterated by what's the drive to work going to be? Maybe I had those fears about my job. They were all at bay because it was all about the driving of the car, which I know sounds so ridiculous, but it was very, very real to me. And then I realized I could do this because I had decided, and I realized I didn't have to like it at first. In fact, it helped me somewhat that I didn't like it because it meant I was very focused, right? I would focus on all the minutiae. I mean, was I comfortable in my seat? Every morning I would check the mirror, the rear view mirror. Is it comfortable for me in case my husband had driven the car before? Right? Am I wearing the right shoes? The shoes, if you're wearing slip-ons, I mean, I didn't want them slipping off. I wanted a nice firm shoe on me. I mean, all these you might say is absolutely ridiculous, but having all that, going into it, thinking all those things, then I felt supported, right? Until I got more accustomed, until I knew I could do it, until I then wanted to do it, until I enjoyed doing it. And yes, I did go through this evolution. And the same thing happened. In fact, I had a similar thing happen years later. So I managed to get to the point where I was driving normally, like a normal human being. But I still had this kind of reticence about driving other people. Didn't really like doing it. And again, down to most other people will volunteer to drive. So that was always fine by me until this one day I was at work. This is many years later. And I had to drive my boss. We were in the UK. He was flying over from the US. And there we were. And I had, I was going to drive him around some of our customer sites, I think it was. And I had a hire car because I didn't have a car at the time. And I was driving in an area I didn't really know, obviously, even though I know about driving on the left in the UK. I didn't know this particular area. And this is back in the days before, GPS was a thing. And I have a really hideous sense of direction. So I was kind of freaked out about this whole thing. And again, it was a similar thing. It was less about how am I going to do this in a way, not worrying about the customer sites we're going to, all the rest of it. That I was very relaxed and capable of and confident about. It was all about how well am I going to drive my boss. And that was kind of like another thing. So I went through that. And then these days, I don't care so much about how I feel about driving other people. I'm able to do it, again, like a normal human being. And the simile there with drinking is, you might get to the point where you think, okay, I'm all right. I'm able to not overdrink so much at home. That's a good thing. But then something new comes up. There's a wedding you have to go to, or some event you have to go to, or there's going to be, a wine tasting, whatever it is. And you might think, like me saying I'm able to drive myself, and no, I'm not going to drive my boss. It becomes just another challenge that we have to tackle. And to continue the driving analogy, it's a bit like I'm your driving instructor, I'm your guide. I'm going to tell you what you need to hear, not necessarily what you think you want to hear, right? It's the equivalent of, if you think about in a driving lesson, there's a safe environment, there's dual controls. That's why I'm here, right? It's a bit like if you're learning to drive and you're being taught by your husband or wife versus an instructor. And it's a very different experience. The relationship is totally different. The instructor is skilled at this. They know what they're doing. They know how to get you your results. They know the straight line between where you are and where you want to be. It's much like me. I teach you the skills and then we practice them so you can do it until you can do it on your own. So I want you to do that little review to think about yourself. Then ask yourself what's the quickest way to get there and take action from that place. P.S. You will find that that is working with me. So in summary, right, life is full of compromises. You can fight this, you can say it's not fair, or you can create the life you want. I help you do that. So decide what you want and take action from that place. Decide what you're willing to compromise on. Do you want to compromise on your drinking at 7 in the evening, or do you want to compromise on your life? Yes, these are two extremes. Play around with this. What other compromise are you making in your life because of the elevated importance that alcohol takes up? And I am here when you are ready to talk. Thank you so much for listening. And if you want one of those intensives, like I said, go grab one, 90dayslater.co/intensive. Otherwise, I will see you next week. If you like what you're learning in the podcast and you want to take the work further and achieve total freedom around alcohol, let's talk. I help my clients stop reaching for that first glass of wine the moment 6 p.m. rolls around and they don't miss out on life. Email me for more information on anna@90dayslater.co. And if you did enjoy the show, I'd really appreciate if you'd leave a rating and review to help others find the 90 Days Later podcast.